Hi, this is Roger Moore, and you're listening to James Bond Radio.
Hello, and welcome to James Bond Radio. This is episode number 196. With me today is my good friend, Bond aficionado, par excellence, Mr. Christopher Wright.
Par excellence, very good, Brian, very good. How are you doing, mate? This is exciting stuff. This is a first. This is a first for JBR, a Dobson Wright production. Hey, it's a bit like Cubby and Harry. What do you think?
Absolutely. We've got loads to talk about on today's episode, haven't we?
We have indeed, yeah. So obviously, everyone will know by the title, "The Watches of Bond," and there's so much that people could talk about when it comes to Bond and watches. Obviously, there are the novels. There's Fleming himself. There's a lot of detail, which we could probably do like 10 episodes alone, couldn't we? On the watches. Basically, so what we're going to do is we're concentrating mainly on the watches for the films, and we're going to segment it into 2 episodes. So this will run through the first half of the films, and then we'll do part 2 another time. But I'm excited, mate. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, this really is a labour of love for me, and it has been for a number of years. So I'm excited to get talking about this. There's just so much content, so much you can discuss through the films, and there's tons to go. So tell me, Chris, how did you sort of get interested in watches in the first place?
Yeah, it's a bit of I think for me, in terms of Bond, watches has always been one of the sort of accessories I've associated with Bond. I think you've got gadgets, like everyone knows Bond and gadgets. And although not every watch he's had has a gadget, particularly in like some of the earlier Bonds, there weren't as many as you get nowadays, it was always something that I found that link, that connection with the watch and the gadgets. And I think for me, that made it very Bond-like, and it's like obviously with Bond, it's the best of everything. It's the best restaurants, the best tailoring, the best this, that, and the other. And I think watches is part of that, isn't it? It's obviously we'll discuss it later on, but obviously in the modern day, it's Omega. He's had a lot of Rolex amongst many other brands, which other people might not be aware of, which we'll come to. But I think there's always had that association with the lifestyle and the luxury, and it's a strange world, sort of horology, in terms of people become really obsessed by it, but it's such an interesting sort of subject. I think not like in terms of timepieces and everything and the detail that you can get, and I can see it. Like I must admit, it's not something that's overly fascinated me since day dot. But I do remember having the old Xeon 007 watch that played the tune back in school, and I loved it. Like as soon as I got it, I bring it into school, and I was showing my mates. And then I'm sure I was a bit of a naughty boy sometimes. I'd be in the middle of class and just play the tune, and like, who's that?
Honestly,
who's that?
we have led parallel lives in that one, because I did exactly the same thing. I had the For Your Eyes Only version.
Nice.
And I would be sitting in some lesson, and I think you pressed the top 2 buttons simultaneously, if I remember rightly, and it was just as soon as I pressed that, ding, 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 and people would just look up straight away and go, Dobson.
He's at it again.
And, it was just so. I wish I still had that watch.
Well, I was just about to ask you, because I sort of had it, and I think I must have left it in the attic of my parents' house or something. And when I was before going to uni, I think I found it, but the strap, it didn't have a strap. I just had the case head. Okay. So I thought, well, I'll get another strap for it, and I did. And then I had it for a few months, and then for whatever reason, I thought, I don't know if I need it. I don't know why. I just thought, maybe I'll sell this and get something else. And I'm just so gutted now, because that would adorn my wrist like almost every day if I had it now.
Oh, totally. I think I just thought at the time it's just a cheap digital watch. It's nothing to write home about. But looking back now, oh God, I wish I still had that. I don't know to this day what happened to it.
No, but it's probably on eBay or something like that, isn't it? Or it has been. So what about you in terms of watches? Obviously, you're a man who's a lot of your life has been a part of sort of watches and timepiece. You're in fact you sort of a bit like Goldfinger. You're an international jewelry sort of seller, which included watches. Can you tell us a bit about that, and where's your sort of fascination for watches come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as a kid, I always had a fascination for them, and I kind of collected them. Nothing particular to write home about in terms of makes or models. I just kind of, if I like the look of something, then I would think, hang on to that. And I think my dad gave me like a Timex or a Seconda watch back in the day, and I thought, well, that's quite cool. I like that, and I used to mess around taking the strap off, taking the bracelet off, just kind of making it a bespoke sort of piece
a Dobson special.
Yeah, a Dobson special indeed. And I just I loved all that, but didn't really think anything of it. And then I remember seeing a certain film called Live and Let Die.
Oh.
And I saw, that Rolex Buzzsaw watch, and I just thought, oh my God, I had no idea that there could be so many hidden talents to all this. And then it was always in the back of my mind, but it was never something that I thought I consciously want to have a career within this. And then when I left sort of college, I decided to take a bit of a stopgap job, working in a jeweller's, and my remit within that was looking after the watch department.
But did you sort of request that when you applied for your interview, or were you just happen to be given that?
I happened to be given that, but I was pleased I was given that, because it was basically a bit of a boys' toy type of thing.
It's better than the rings and the bracelets and the necklaces.
Well, precisely, yeah. And so I had this kind of. I used to look after about 14 or 15 brands. It was a really big kind of arcade. And within that, you had everything from cheap and cheerful to really top-end Swiss watches. And back in the day, it was a case of you could display them however you wanted to display them. You could merchandise them however you wanted to do it. It was very much, you had a free reign of how these things should look. And I just thought, watch is a watch, really, isn't it? And then when I realised the depth of the brands, the depths of the styles, the bracelets, the straps, and there's so much more to it than would have first appear. And I think that's where my love started to really, really grow. And I thought, you know what, I quite like this business. It's good. There's quite a lot to it. And then it quite literally just snowballed from there. And then I realised that just going into the history of each of the different watch houses and what they've brought to the table over the years. It was just fascinating.
I was just about to say, it is a fascinating subject, isn't it? And so was that part of your job to learn that background, or you just suddenly?
Yeah. It was, I did like a qualification in it, basically, just like a basic qualification to say that I had an overview of it, but it was just, there was so much to it. And each watch house had their own unique stamp or their own unique style, or the you could look at a certain watch and knew it belonged to that family. Right. And then when I realised that they all were obviously interlinked, but the families within each group of watches it was just fascinating. I just actually really, really took to it, and then it just became. Whenever there was a new watch or somebody had a watch, I was always, what have you got? Let's have a look at it. Let's have a fiddle around with it.
Are you wearing anything at the moment? Watches, that is, by the way.
Yeah, I am. I'm wearing a watch. It's a kind of an Omega Seamaster look-alike. Nice. It's not an Omega Seamaster. I did have one.
That's
this
really
one.
nice.
This one is a brand called Swiss Military, and it's a. I don't know if you can see it on there.
No, that looks great.
It's basically I guess an Omega Seamaster copy.
Yeah.
Sort of style. But I've had various watches over the years. I've had a Rolex.
You've had a Rolex?
Yeah, I've had a Rolex.
What, one from the side street in Bangkok, or from?
Sadly, well, I no. Strangely or not, I've never. It was actually the genuine real McCoy. I decided to sell it a few years ago. Kind of wish I hadn't now. Wish I'd held on to the thing. But that was you know, a kind of a Bond copy if you like, but it was the real McCoy.
Wow.
But and I've had a couple of Omega Seamasters as well, and again, at the time, I kind of needed the money, so I decided just to flog them on. But they just go for an absolute mint these days.
These days, yeah, definitely. Well, unfortunately, I've never, aside from my Xeon 007 watch, I've never owned an official Bond watch. But you mentioned obviously the Live and Let Die watch, and that's one that I think sticks in the memory more than any other. And obviously that's one we'll get to a little bit later. I haven't got a Bond watch on at the moment, but I have. I got actually this one not so long ago. It's a Tissot PR100 titanium one.
Very
which
nice.
I quite like the face on it. The face is quite cool.
It's nice and clear.
And I like the titanium bracelet as well. It's one of those things though where you have it for the first few weeks and you're a bit, you really take care of everything. You put it in its box, put it to bed at night, you keep it with all the soft foam around it, and then as soon as it gets one little scratch on it, you're like, oh well, it's done now.
Yeah, completely. I think especially on a bracelet like that, it's like a two-tone bracelet, and if the polished bit gets scratched, it's just like
that's it, game over.
Yeah, it's a lovely dial though.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Right then, so I guess before we move on, before we go into obviously the watches with the films, in terms of Fleming, you mentioned him earlier. He was a big watch guy, wasn't he? Obviously into brands in terms of clothing and everything. But what can you tell us about Fleming and watches?
Well, I mean, I think Fleming really wanted to. He was quite clear that he wanted his character of Bond to be defined by that gentlemanly look, and I think his style of watch was important. But I think Fleming himself was a big collector of it, and clearly he knew his stuff, and of course he owned a Rolex himself.
Very nice. And that there might be what we can say now is at the end of this episode there may or may not be a potentially a James Bond quiz on watches. That's all we're going to say now. We won't say anything else. But if people might want to take notes along the way, then that's fine with us. But we put that little caveat in now.
Yeah.
So
Indeed.
we can say that.
Indeed.
In fact, even in the novels, didn't Fleming write that Bond's watch had to be a Rolex?
Yes.
And obviously he was basing a lot of because Fleming's was an Explorer, is that right?
Yeah, sorry, yes, he was Rolex Explorer, yes, 10-16, I think it is.
That's it. But the model of Bond's watch was never specifically stated, just that it was a Rolex. Is that right?
Yeah,
in the novels,
correct.
this is.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Right. Well, should we have a listen to a bit of theme tune and then come back and discuss the film watches?
Let's do that.
Excellent. Here we go.
My name's Bond. James Bond. Bond.
James.
Bond, what do you think you're doing?
Keeping the British end up, sir.
Welcome to James Bond Radio. News, reviews, and discussion of all things 007.
Lucy. As you can see, I have no problem with female authority.
Oh, pipe down, 007.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to lie.
Okay, now on to the films, hey? So, obviously we mentioned earlier, Fleming's watch was a Rolex, and back in the day, particularly, Rolex was associated with Bond right from the get-go. But in the films, the first watch we see Bond wearing is not a Rolex.
No.
Can you tell us a bit about that then, Brian? What's this one?
The watch that he first wears at the Ambassadors is what's called a Gruen, Gruen, and it's quite an understated dress watch that obviously you see him wearing at that particular scene. It's the subsequently went out of business in the 70s, but it's a kind of unusual looking watch in the fact that it's not a watch that you would associate with Bond, and it's just a very, very simple dial, very, very simple bracelet, strap on that, and is
it a fabric strap? Do you know?
Yes,
fabric strap and sort of a gold
Gold dial.
Gold dial, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of interesting things about this. Obviously, we see him, as you mentioned, in the casino wearing it. Also, when he's playing the little game of golf with Sylvia Trench, he's wearing it in there as well. So that is the first time we see him wearing a watch. But what we've got to think of is, back in the day, this is kind of an interesting area. So in terms of what watches to wear with what clothing, so you have your everyday, your casual, you have your suits and your business and smart look, and then you have your dinner jackets, which is your black tie, the top level thing. And now, obviously, later on, Bond does wear a Rolex, but in those days, in particular, having wearing a DJ and having like a diver's watch is a bit of a faux pas, would you say?
Absolutely.
So having the dress watch, which is what the Gruen Precision is a lot more suitable for when he's wearing his dinner jacket. Do you agree?
Absolutely. It's certainly more in keeping with a tailored dress suit. Absolutely. I think just as soon as you say Bond watch to anybody, they straight away think of a chunky Rolex Master, that sort of style of watch. But that's much more in keeping with evening wear, certainly.
So in terms of nowadays, do you think the attitude has changed slightly? So I think with like suit wear, so if someone's wearing a business suit, you could have a diving watch and it would look fine. You could have your Submariners, your Seamasters, and they look great with a suit. Do you think you could wear a diving watch with a dinner jacket, or do you think it still has to be a dress watch, or as times change and you think a diving watch is fine because of the quality that you get? What do you think?
That's a great question. I think depends on where you're coming from, but I think the connoisseur would say you need the dress watch for the dressy occasion, something a bit more elegant on a strap. Whereas the sports watch is obviously more fitting for a sportier occasion. But I think in this day and age, I think it's a lot more acceptable to be suited and booted wearing a more bracelet, sportier, chunkier watch. Yeah. But I think of that time period, certainly back in '62, that would have been a faux pas. So, and especially in the way that Fleming and obviously Terence Young would have had a big style parting of that. So I think it was right to go with a thinner cased dress watch.
Definitely. And we have to also say that JBR listener Fraser Lockley happens to own a Gruen Precision 510, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. And
have you seen it?
Yes, I have seen it.
I still haven't seen it yet.
No, it looks the business, and he's kind of, I think he's tailored it with his own strap. But
is it a leather strap or a fabric strap? What do you go for?
I think he went for a fabric in the end. I think he might have. He might have even bespoked it with a bit of a NATO style strap, but it's actually looks the business. It looks good.
Wow, I have to check it out.
It was quite a good find, that I think, for him.
Okay, so basically, once Bond gets to Jamaica, the dress watch, the Gruen, is no more. We now have him wearing his classic. So this is the Rolex Submariner. This is the 65338, which is also known as the Big Crown Submariner. Now, we see him wearing this quite a lot. So basically, in terms of sightings, when he's being driven from the airport with Mr. Jones, he's wearing it. There's that bit when he's on Quarrel's boat where they talk about the radioactivity of the samples, and the radium dial on his watch kind of sets it off. There's also the bit where he's in bed with Miss Taro when she's on the phone about to get the taxi. Throughout that whole scene, you see him wearing it. And throughout his time on Crab Key, when he's on the beach with Honey, when they're actually in Dr. No's lair, you can see he's wearing it. So this has a lot of screen time. And also, I think the 6538 has become known as Bond's Submariner, or the Submariner Bond. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what do you think of this one? Because this Submariner crops up in the first four Bond films. So this is the one that is really associated with Bond. So what do you think of this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such a signature piece from the get-go. The very fact that it's in four films says a lot. I think it's instantly identifiable as Bond's Rolex. That whole style, the whole case, the dial, the big crown. It's quite iconic.
Yeah, very distinctive as well. Like the crown doesn't have. It's sort of unprotected, isn't it?
Yes.
Which is distinctive at that time, I think.
Yes. I don't think the crown was normally as exposed as that.
Yeah.
Hence the sort of what's called the big crown. But I just think as soon as you see that watch, you think Bond. Well, I certainly do.
Yes, me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of interesting points around this one. Is from so many different sources when we've been sort of researching this. Certain watches supposedly belong to certain people. Now, this watch apparently I've read that it was owned by Cubby Broccoli and he lent it to production. I've read that it is owned by Terence Young and he lent it. I've read that it is owned by Sean Connery himself, that he lent it. I also read somewhere that it was an ex-Royal Navy diver who was a member of the crew on the film and he lent it. But I can't seem to find anywhere that's. The only thing that I can find, which is definite, is that Rolex refused to lend one of their watches to the film. Yeah. So it definitely wasn't a product sort of gift from Rolex, as it were. So yeah.
I think looking into that as well, because I tried to look into that as well. I'm pretty convinced of the stuff I've read that Cubby had lent Sean a watch. Yeah. Now whether that was the Rolex or whether it was even the Gruen.
That's a good point. Yeah, it could be either.
I don't know, but I feel confident that Cubby was involved in there somewhere. But obviously there's so many stories there. Yeah.
Well, that's actually going back to the Gruen. There were articles that read that it was Connery's own that he brought along, and also you're right that it was a gift to him on the set, and one assumes by Cubby or Harry perhaps. Yeah. So it is interesting finding out all this history behind it. I really like it. It's great.
I think Cubby would be more likely to do that than Harry would, possibly.
Yeah, I think so. Although saying that, didn't Harry buy one of the crew members? I'm sure there was a story where one of the crew members was looking at a jewellery shop as a gift for his anniversary. Yeah. And he was looking at like the cheaper ends of the... I don't know if it was a ring or a bracelet or a necklace or something. And Harry comes over and says, no, you should get that one there. And it was like $50,000 or something. He's like, Harry, I can't afford that. And then the next day, he came back home after work and the expensive thing was a piece of jewellery was on his bedside table and Harry bought it for him. So, it's pretty crazy.
He had his moments as well, yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, so that's Dr. No. If we're moving on to From Russia With Love, we have the same two watches. So again, we've got the Gruen Precision 510. We've got the Big Crown Rolex Submariner. If we go to the Gruen first, so it's a bit... Sometimes it's not as easy to identify the watches in terms of the clips that we can see him wearing it, but he does wear it at the Gypsy Camp. You can get a brief glimpse of it. It's a bit better when you see him being driven away by Kerim's son when he's with Kerim in the car. You see it quite a bit there, and when Bond and Tanya are discussing the Lecter, you definitely see it then, and also in the final scene with Rosa Klebb, you see he's wearing it. So again, it is interesting as to what scenes beforehand do you think, right, we know he's going to wear this watch in this scene, or was it a case of, right, whichever is the closest watch, stick it on? And then obviously they're professional departments, it wouldn't be the latter, but I still find it quite fascinating as to to pick out what scenes he wears what watches.
Absolutely, and I think taking what you said there, I think in today's filmmaking world, that would be thought about so detailed about what he's going to wear in each scene and why, and I think back then it was,
and how much money they'll make from it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Just seem frame by frame almost. And I think today, back then it was just right, get on with the scene, stick it on,
and if the prop's not there, someone's got to lend him a watch from somewhere.
Yeah, totally.
Which I think happens in some of the later films, but yes. And he wears the Submariner again, so this one gets a bit more screen time. We actually get a really nice close-up of this. So first of all, we see it when he's punting with Sylvia, and obviously he's on the phone, Univex, which I really love that little bit. But the time where he's in the embassy, and the bomb's about to go off, we get a really nice shot, close-up of it, when he's sort of checking the time. against the clock in the Russian embassy.
Russian clocks are always right.
Correct. Yeah, so good, isn't it? So he's waiting for the Keren's bomb to go off, and during the train scenes with Tanya and Ray Grant, we see him wearing it as well. So, and this is the same one as Dr. No, so it's got the same leather strap. We get the same Submariner in Goldfinger and Thunderball, but as we'll find out, it's a different strap for those ones. So moving on to Goldfinger then. Again, we get the same two watches. So in Dr. No from Russia and Goldfinger, we get the Gruen Precision, we get the Submariner 6538. So what do you think about the scenes where we see it in Goldfinger?
Well, if you straight away you go with that iconic scene at the start. And when he's
it gets a double close up, doesn't it? Because you get it when he's broken into Ramirez sort of a warehouse and he's doing the plastic explosive, and when he puts a detonator in, he checks it when his watch is over his dry suit, and then obviously we get the very famous one with the cigarette lighter and checks it before the bomb goes off, and it's just quality, isn't it?
That's sort of is burnt in my retinas that scene, and I think it probably was the first watch scene in a Bond film that I distinctly remember, and it's just the casual way he looks at that as it's sweeping round before the bomb goes off. It's just
that sweeping second is beautiful, isn't it?
It's perfection. I mean, it just peaked at that moment, really. But no, I love to see that scene. Just looks so good, and then we've obviously got the Gruen comes back into this when Bond is with Colonel Smithers.
That's it, yeah. In the Bank of England scene again, dinner jacket. Where's the Gruen? So it's the right sort of setting it? The right sort of tone. He also wears it when he's in the fight with Oddjob in Fort Knox. You can see him wearing that as well, which is quite. And in some of the Kentucky scenes. Yeah. When he's driving the DB5 as well, when he encounters Tilly Masterson, he's wearing it. So he wears the Submariner. I think is purely the pre-titles. I think, and then the rest of the time he's wearing the Gruen. From what I can tell.
I think that the choice of those watches must have been very heavily influenced by Terence Young.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
He would have said, no, at this point you need the dress watch. At this point you need the Rolex. I'm convinced of that.
To quote Winton Kid, what taste, style? Oh dear. I think there is something that we definitely need to talk about in terms of the Submariner and Goldfinger. It's something that I've seen crop up a lot, and it's something which it's hard not to notice, and it's the strap width on the lugs of the watch. Okay, so the strap, I think, is a 16mm strap. The lugs a 20mm strap. So when he does that close-up, it's a beautiful watch, but you see there's a gap. And it's just like, why didn't they get a bigger strap? It's such a shame, isn't it? What do you think of that?
That I've got to be honest, as a bit of a purist, that irritates the life out of me. Every time I see that, I think, how hard it would have been to get the right strap.
I know.
It just seems
doesn't look
odd.
right, does it? Because the watch itself is perfection, and it's James Bond. He's got to have everything like spot on, and it just seems so strange. And it is like, for anyone who hasn't noticed, if you particularly the scene where he's got the cigarette lighter and he's checking it, you can really see that strap just needs to be that little bit thicker, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, it just looks as if it's borrowed, which it probably was. Yeah,
well, that's true.
To put on, and that I must admit, every time I look at that, I think that's just not finished off. If it had been the 20mm, that would have been perfect, but don't know the reason behind that choice.
And there's also a bit of debate about the colouring of the strap. So in different not different versions, but different prints of the film, I think the strap comes up as different colours. But I think it's olive, burgundy and navy blue, I think, are the three colours. But interestingly, everyone will call that a NATO, not everyone, but certain people call that a NATO strap. But the term NATO strap wasn't coined until the early 70s. Yeah. So I don't know what you'd call it, just a striped fabric strap. I don't know.
I believe so. Yeah, just a fabric strap. Yeah. Yeah,
but I think that for me has got to be one of the classic. That's the classic version of the 6538. Is that one? Even though it's strange with that strap, for me that's a classic Bond Submariner look.
Yeah. Completely with you. On that.
Actually, so we get a bonus watch in this one as well, don't we?
Yeah.
I tell you what, let's go back to From Russia with Love before we go on to the bonus watch of this one, because we can't go past. Obviously, the main thing we want to focus on is Bond's watches, but equally there are other characters with other watches in the films which we have to sort of mention.
Yeah.
Let's just go back to From Russia with Love before we finish off Goldfinger. Obviously, we've got Red Grant. We've got Red Grant's watch, which is probably, alongside maybe the Live and Let Die Submariner, the most famous watch in the series. If you think about how often it's used, how it's used in From Russia, the effectiveness, it's just it's the first gadget watch in Bond as well, isn't it?
Red
Grant's, even though it's not Bond's, it's the first gadget watch. So what would you say to that? What are your thoughts on the Red Grant watch? And do we know what make and model it is? Because it's mentioned in the book, isn't it? But we don't know for certain.
Well, I've done a little bit of research on that. The book, the book From Russia with Love has the watch as a Gerard Perregaux. Now, Gerard Perregaux is a very upmarket watch brand, but they are very much dress led. It's not the sort of watch that would take the hard pounding that you would expect from Donovan Red Grant. So every time I see that sequence and think, was it a Gerard Perregaux? They're a lot more of a dainty sort of a I'm going to maybe say feminine. Certainly a less ostentatious watch.
Yeah.
Than what you would expect. Now, there was a particular watch that was out around that time that Gerard Perregaux made called the Gyromatic, and it may actually be that particular watch. It was a little bit of a thicker case, but I can't identify that as being exactly true. But it was a thicker case, whereas a lot of them of that time were a thinner case. But I would like to think that they were authentic to the novel, because they certainly were at that time. So.
Yeah. And what an amazing watch as well, because I've seen quite a few people have purchased prop versions of it that actually still have the garrote.
Yeah.
So you can buy a watch that looks similar. Obviously, it wouldn't be a Gerard Perregaux, but it's got the pull-out string and the pull-out garrote, and you just think, God, is that dangerous? Who's got one of those?
Just a bit, yeah.
But it is. In fact, check it out. There it is.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Just for today, there it is. For everyone who's not watching on YouTube, I have a lovely animated version of Red Grant's watch.
Be a particularly unpleasant and humiliating one. Perfect.
There he is, strangling the old chess piece. Brilliant. Yeah, we couldn't go through the watches of Bond without mentioning Red Grant. It's hugely part of it, and the fact is that Bond uses it to kill Grant. Hoisted by his own petard, as Tom and I like to say, and that very much was in the case of Red Grant.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to Goldfinger, we have a bonus watch here. Now, this one is also a Rolex. This one is worn by Pussy Galore, and it's a GMT Master. Now, we see her wear it quite a lot in this one, don't we? So
yes.
When she's flying with the Pussy Galore's Flying Circus, when Bond first meets her on the plane, that classic exchange, and we see them wearing it, and also at the end when having that little when they're macking out after he pulls over the parachute, you obviously see it then as well. So yeah, what are your thoughts? Do you think as a pilot is that the right sort of watch for Pussy Galore?
I think it pretty much is, and I think it suits her character. I think that the dial is known today as a Pepsi dial, as in Pepsi Cola, because it's got kind of blue and white on one side, and I think it kind of suits that character. It's sporty, but it's still upmarket. It's dressy, but it has a certain uniqueness to her. I think that's a good fit for her.
And I think with Pussy Galore, she obviously likes the luxuries in life. Do you remember in that sort of scene when Goldfinger asked her, what are you going to do with your share of the cash? And she's like, retire to an island, put out a sign, no trespassing, and go back to nature. She wants the finer things in life, and I think having the Rolex and the GMT is a good one for her, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
that goes rather well.
And there's a couple of interesting trivia that we've got around the GMT. Do you want to hit us with a couple of those?
Regarding the oh yes, of course. This is something I didn't know myself actually until recently. That the GMT Master was actually worn by Roger Moore in The Spy Who Loved Me, but obviously never as a publicity shot, but never actually used in the actual film. And I'll be honest, I didn't know that myself till not so long ago.
And that's a bit crazy, isn't it? Because he's obviously heavily associated with the Seiko, which we'll come to later. But the fact that he had it in the publicity still, and he's in his naval outfit, isn't he, in that publicity still? And obviously he wears that outfit a lot in the film, and you think, well, maybe he was going to wear it. So it's strange that they had that publicity shot of him wearing it. I don't know, again, was it his or was it given to him? Who knows? And equally, there's Evelyn Tremble, Peter Sellers in the 67 Casino Royale. He also wore a GMT Master. And that one was a gadget watch. Do you remember it had this sort of TV screen on it so he could watch?
Of course,
which was quite interesting. So, it's been worn by three... Well, I suppose two. Was Peter Sellers wasn't classed as Bond, was he? If he was Evelyn Tremble, he was one of the few people who wasn't called James Bond in that film, or was he?
Well, I think he was.
He was a Bond as well.
I mean, everyone says David Niven, but just about everybody was Bond.
Was James Bond in that film? Okay, so he has worn it twice in that case. So going on to the next film. Now, for me, this was probably while we're sort of researching this episode. This was probably the most fascinating film for me in terms of Bond watches and what we see on the screen, because there's lots of great stories around this. So Bond, we don't see him wear the Gruen. At least I don't think we do. I can't remember a scene where I see him wearing the Gruen. But he does wear two watches. He's got the Submariner again. It's the same one from Thunderball with the striped strap. It's the 6538, which we see him when he's having lunch with Domino by the pool. Mm-hmm. Obviously, when Q first arrives, before he gives him the next watch, which we'll come to in a minute, he's wearing it then. Also, when he's in bed with Fiona, he's wearing the Submariner. When he's tasting Domino's foot, he's wearing it, which is something would always be keen to do. When he shoots Vargas, and then before he swallows radioactive pill, we see him wear it as well. So that's a lot of screen time for a watch which really isn't promoted in the film because it's up against something else. Now, what can you tell us about this other watch? Well,
for the first time in the series, they decide to go with a different brand, and they go to Breitling as the watch for the water scenes, if you like. And called the Breitling Top Time, and that's obviously is the watch with the built-in Geiger counter. And
this is Bond's first gadget watch, then, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess so. And interesting choice. I mean, they're a very esteemed watch house in themselves. But I wonder, what was the decision to move away from Rolex to go to Breitling at the time? I'm sure money at the end of the day. But
there's got to be a story behind that somewhere, isn't there?
Yeah. What that is, I don't know. But I think it's a very distinctive looking watch, and just a different take on it, really.
And interestingly, when we see it with different styles of bracelet as well. So with the Breitling Top Time, it would normally just be the round dial, but with this one, obviously, it's been updated by Q Branch. You mentioned the Geiger counter, and it's also been housed in this sort of watertight case, hasn't it? This sort of silver case that surrounds it, which is interesting. But also, when Q first delivers it, we see it have one style of bracelet, and then later on, when Bond's in Palmyra and here, there, and everything else, he's got a different style bracelet, which is interesting. It's all these little sort of nuances which you wouldn't normally pick up on. I find quite fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you come on to Francois Derval,
yes,
we're still sticking with Breitling, but we go with a slightly different one now. We go with the Navitimer, and that's another kind of more complicated movement, but on a leather strap this time. And I can only assume that they had. Well, obviously they had a deal with Breitling on that particular film, but it was a different take on it again.
And the Navitimer was a perfect watch for Duval, wasn't it? Sort of a pilot's watch. You know, it's. I was looking into them. They're beautiful watches. I think. Like, there's a lot going on them.
Oh
but they're great watches. I think. Yeah. But with the Top Time, there's a lot. There's probably one of my favourite stories about a Bond watch comes with the Top Time. So basically, obviously we mentioned it as the first gadget watch worn by Bond, but the actual dial, the actual sort of just the case without any bracelet. I don't even know if it had. Yeah, no, it did have the waterproof housing on it. Turned up in a car boot sale, like a thrift, like a garage sale. I'm not sure what the Americans would call it. I think in early 2013, some guy had found this. Do you know how much he bought it for? £25. £25. This is the original Breitling Top Time from Thunderbolt. He didn't know it. Like he thought he recognised it was a Breitling, a Top Time, a Breitling Top Time, but he didn't. He had to basically send it away, and it came back being verified that it was not only authentic, but it was the actual watch that they used in Thunderbolt. So he bought it in 2013 for £25, sent it off, got it verified, put it up for a Christie's auction later the same year, and guess how much it sold for?
£50.
£50. Yeah, £103,875.
Jeez.
Talk about a markup. It's like,
that's phenomenal.
What a find! Like that's like $1 billion to 1, that sort of find, but it's one of the best stories I've ever heard about sort of a Bond watch. £25 and then sell it for a fortune, and that's.
Just back on the subject of talking about Breitling, and it's not necessarily related to Thunderbolt, but back in the day when I was working in the jewelers, I looked after the Breitling section, and they had a watch called the Emergency Watch, and it retail. This is going back 20, 30 years, and it's called the Emergency Watch with a crown on it, like this ridiculous size, and it retailed then for $3,000. I don't know how much they retail for now, but this is a long time ago.
Yeah,
and it's called the Emergency Watch because you could anywhere in the world, it had an actual retractable aerial, and you could put. I mean, it was a Bond watch of the day. You could actually extend the aerial onto the watch, and it gave out an SOS signal anywhere you were in the world. If you were, but the ridiculous thing about it is, and I don't know if you can still get them. You could only use it once, and if you used it once, it was then inoperative.
What you can? What in terms of the signal was inoperative, or the actual watch was inoperative?
The actual signal.
Right. And how long did the signal last?
I think it was several days. It just put like an SOS frequency to whatever your location was.
Yeah. God, that would be a bugger if you're sitting on the loo having a rage and you knock it by accident. And then people coming to your door, what's going on? Are you all right? You'd be like, oh, what's it?
I just wanted 5 minutes peace. Yeah.
Oh, man. That's an incredible watch.
It's just crazy. Absolutely. I couldn't believe it. And it actually said, like, warning, do not use this. Or do not, almost do not pull the trigger almost.
It's like the gear stick, isn't it? Don't touch the button and release the thing.
And it was it had this sort of, like an instruction book like you would find on a car or something.
Yeah.
And it was just...
Wow. Did anyone purchase it from your store?
No, I don't remember it everything. But it was sought after by the
well, I bet
the watch anoraks of the world.
But who would come to save you? So if you press that button, who's going to rock up to try and save you? Is it like that's just mad to me. It's brilliant though.
It was crazy. But what was just amazing was on the opposite side, like on the 9 o'clock side, was an actual retractable aerial. I don't know how far it extended, but you just think, what a mad concept. But
Yeah.
every time I see, that brand, I just think of that watch. It was just.
I'd love to see how much they're going for now, and if you could compare one that has been used to one that hasn't been used, how much the price difference is. That's incredible. Oh man, that's brilliant. Okay, so just briefly listing some of the sightings we see at the top time. Obviously, we see it quite a lot. We see it when Q first delivers it in the Bahamas. We see it when Bond does a nighttime dive underwater, the Disco Volante, when he sort of sees the underwater hatch. We see it when he's aboard the Disco Volante as well, when he's checking to see if the bombs are on board. They check the radioactive count, and when he's sneaks on as one of Largo's henchmen. So it gets quite a bit of screen time as well, really, between the two of them. And you mentioned, obviously, the Navitimer by Duval's watch, which is interesting. So, yeah, I think... But now we get into some really interesting points, because if you look... In fact, going back to Duval's watch, when Bond removes Duval's watch, it's not a Navitimer, is it?
No.
We've had a look at this, and it's a different dial watch, and it's a different. We couldn't quite tell what it is.
It's hard to tell.
But it's not the Navitimer. They probably didn't want to wreck it or whatever. But it's not a Navitimer. But equally, like, we see Bond wearing a couple of different watches here. So we see Bond wearing, when Bond goes down to recover Duval's watch, when he removes the dog's tags, he's wearing a watch which isn't the top time, and it isn't the Submariner. Again, it's very difficult to see.
Yeah. It looks like the original Rolex, but it's hard to verify that.
Yeah. And there's a couple of different bits in this where we see Bond wearing different watches. The other one, of course, is when he's in the helicopter with Felix and they're searching for the Vulcan. The first time they search, he isn't wearing a watch, but the second time he is. It might be the other way around, but I think it's that way around. And he's wearing that sort of silver bracelet, white dialed watch while he's looking through the binoculars. But again, that's not the Submariner. That's not the top time. What watch is that one? And who's is it? The case that someone just lent it to him, sort of thing. It's like these days, like you said, there'd be so much on it. You'd have the prop department waiting with a watch ready to go on every scene. But back then, obviously, the consistency about those things they weren't paramount, was it? In terms of what it is today.
I mean, the continuity on the early Bonds is never a huge.
No, not at all. But I'd love to have a list of all the actual watches that were worn, like obviously particularly by the Bonds and the Bond doubles. Like obviously the Underwater is a Bond double, I assume, like not Connery himself, but it's still a Bond watch as it was worn by the character of Bond at that time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I find Thunderball quite a fascinating one. Yeah. All right.
Even just those scenes, when you're trying to identify what Bond with Felix, there's so many shots of that which is either inverted, or just don't look exactly what they did in the film, or so I don't know what was going on when they're doing those scenes.
You wonder that because when you're watching it. It's a bit like, the Dr. No fight with where he's fighting Mr. Jones and he throws a punch with one, or sort of, prepares to punch with one hand and then he slogs him with the other. But obviously because of the cut, you don't really notice it. And again, with this scene where they're in the helicopter, which I think was shot in studio for the close-ups, they kind of flip it. So they're going one way, but then they flip it and go in the other way. And I guess... it's not distracting because unless you sort of go into detail like we are now, you probably wouldn't notice it. So it is interesting how they use those sort of techniques. So we go from a film which has lots and lots of watch talk in Thunderball to You Only Live Twice, which really was quite hard to sort of garner much watch information. We see Bond wearing a watch on a couple of occasions when he's... when he falls into the seat in Tiger Tanaka's office when he first meets him, and also when he's doing the safe cracking in Osato's sort of office. I think I remember him seeing them on those occasions, possibly one or two others. They're not glaringly obvious, but we think he's wearing the Gruen Precision then. But that's about it. I can't really. Did you get any other information about this one?
No, there's not a huge amount on that one, other than, as I say, the Gruen pops up again. No, it's very, very difficult to identify anything else.
Yeah, it is strange, isn't it? How some are very, very watch heavy, like Thunderball and some of the other ones previously, but yet obviously You Only Live Twice is less. And there are one or two others that watches feature heavily compared to certain films which they don't at all. Okay, so moving swiftly on to one of my favourites. So we've got On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Bond wears two different Rolexes in this. This time he's got a new Submariner. So he's got a 5513, the 5513 Submariner, which reappears later on in Live and Let Die and Golden Gun. But he also has probably my favourite looking of all the Bond watches, and I think this is the most beautiful watch ever. Really? I was going to ask you that. So it's the pre-Daytona chronograph, the 6238, which Bond also wears when he's being Sir Hilary Bray in Peace Gloria. And for me, it's the most beautiful looking watch. Like, I don't know if that's the only Rolex chronograph we get in Bond. I'm assuming it is.
I think it is.
It must be. But it looks the business, absolute business, doesn't it? So you're obviously a fan of it as well, then.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just about to say exactly the same thing. I just think the whole look of that, the safe cracking scene and that is great when he uses that. But I've got the same feelings on that. I just think the two dials looks really elegant.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Really is. Yeah. So we first see him with the 5513. And now this one is when he's in Estoril. So we see him at the hotel and the casino scenes. When Bond finds, when he's in his office looking at the souvenirs from the previous missions, he's wearing the 5513 then. When he's with Tracy at Draco's estate, wiping her eyes, you can see him wearing it then. Obviously, you mentioned the Gunbolt's office. He places the Submariner 5513 on the photocopier while he's checking out a copy of Playboy, which I believe you own. Is that right, or is it Darren? Somewhere. Yeah, okay. We probably wouldn't want to bring it out in its condition at the moment.
Good,
anyway,
good, no. Good Lord, no.
Okay, that's good. And at the end, when the wedding scenes with Tracy's wearing the 5513 as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
Now this is an interesting part. So George Lazenby, as we all famously know, bought a Rolex Submariner to help him win the role of Bond, because he saw obviously Connery wore one in the films. He thought that would help him. Now supposedly the 5513 that we see him wear in Majesty's is Lazenby's. Are we able to clarify this or not, or do you think it isn't?
I think it probably is, because
I've got a feeling it is.
I think if he's gone to that trouble to buy one to impress Saltzman and Broccoli, he must have realistically kept that one on during filming. I would have thought. And you know what?
If I was a Bond actor and I had my own Bond watch, apart from maybe action scenes where it might get smashed or whatever, I'd be up for wearing it, because it's your own watch, and then you're keeping it afterwards, and it's giving your own watch a bit of it's screen time and history, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
But so there is a bit of a, I don't know, it's if we're looking at the pre-Daytona, so there are the instances with the 5513 when he's got the pre-Daytona, the chronograph. This is where he's posing as Sir Hilary Bray. So we see him. You get a really good shot of it, actually. When he's been locked in the wheelhouse and he's checking the timing of the cable cars and everything. That's a really, really nice shot of it there. And we get to see him also when he's bedding Ruby, and when he's bedding Nancy. Now, this is interesting. Okay, so supposedly he's wearing the chronograph when he's with Ruby and Nancy, but there are stills, publicity stills, black and white, where he's wearing the 5513. So it's interesting to know which one he's wearing on that particular scene.
I'm fairly convinced one of them must have been his own.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. So there's a bit of trivia around this one. So the chronograph, actually, it was sold in 2003, December 16th, for £22,912, and it also had a production still of the watch and a letter. Now this is cool. The original receipt from Boucherer, would you pronounce that maybe? Boucherer from Switzerland to David H. Middlemass of Eon Productions, dated October the 23rd, 1968. The invoice also included the handwritten words, "This is the watch for James Bond." Oh,
yeah, that says it all, doesn't it?
Very, very cool, yeah. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic. Now, this is also another bit of interesting trivia. So, this watch is quite distinctive because it has a second hand, a red second hand on the chronograph. Now, apparently, that was going to be redesigned to be used as a compass in the film. So, it was going to be a gadget watch.
Oh, right. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Right.
And obviously they didn't go down that, but that would have been an interesting point of view. I was just trying to think what scenes would he use a compass. Maybe I don't know, when he's trying to get back to Lauterbrunnen or whatever. I'm not sure, but
finding his way from room to room.
Yeah, right. That's that's probably the best way to do it. And yeah, so I think Majesty's is good. You got two solid Rolexes there, both beautiful, but the chronograph for me is just incredible. Okay, so we go on from, and again, a film with great watches onto Diamonds Are Forever. Now, this one's even harder to sort of be distinctive about than You Only Live Twice, because the only bit that I can remember is obviously in the lift when he's about to fight Peter Franks. He's checking his watch before he sort of goes back, breaks the glass and everything. But it's so difficult to see what the watch is. Again, presume it might be the Gruen, but it's so difficult. What have you found anything out with this one? It's a tough one.
I'm of the same opinion that it must be. If it's not a Gruen, then it's certainly a very thin cased dress watch, because it's not ostentatious. It's not big and bulky.
No.
So it has to be something a thinner case watch, and I can only assume the Gruen. Because it's a smaller dial. But yeah, you're right. That's the only scene in which you really see that.
And we never get like a proper close up of the Gruen, do we? In any of the films, because I guess Diamonds must be, if it is indeed the Gruen, it must be the last film that Bond wears the Gruen. So perhaps maybe it is Connery's. Who knows? But or Cubby's maybe. But either way, we never got that close-up. You know, like the Submariners, we've had some really nice close-ups of. We never got that of the Gruen, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, it's strange. Again, Diamonds, there's not any sort of heavily watch-related scenes, are there, or anything like that? But
not at all.
So it is tricky. Okay, so we're coming on to an absolute beauty now. Yes. Obviously, Live and Let Die. Again, two watches for Bond. Two brilliant watches. Let's start with the Hamilton Pulsar. What are your thoughts on this one?
I thought that was as cool as you like when I first saw that back in the day.
Did you want one? Did you see it on the screen like? Oh.
Yeah. I got a similar version. I did actually have one of the LED watches, because I just loved that look of it. Obviously, it wasn't the Hamilton Pulsar, but it was a similar kind of looking watch, because Chris, the case was about this thick, just to house the battery.
Right, so you need to do weightlifting before you can actually wear the watch.
Yeah, absolutely. But I bought one on the strength of that scene, because I just think it's great when he just taps that 548.
The question's got to be asked, Brian. Have you ever used it where you've woken up in bed with a beautiful lady and just sort of checked your watch and been like, 5:48.
I don't think it was 5:48. It would have been a bit later. but
5:48 in the afternoon.
I'm sure it's happened at some stage. But I just love that look. It's
very, very obviously it's in that time that was super sort of high tech. What sort of futuristic style, isn't it? Obviously, it looks quite sort of spacey and quite futuristic in terms of the styling. You mentioned the big, sort of thick case and everything, I think it was the first LED watch to be used on a film. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. I believe Telly Savalas was one of the very first people to.
That's
buy
it.
One.
Yeah, I believe he was, and. Interestingly, because when we see it, so obviously it's in the pre-title scene, not in the pre-title scene, I beg your pardon, in the post-title scene, but it's the first time when we see Bond. he's obviously in bed with Miss Caruso, and we see him check the time. Now he checks the time, and then it goes off, and he presses it again. Now, what I found out was that the actual time that the flash would go up was something like 1.25 seconds. So after that, it automatically turned off, and you'd have to press it again to go back on, which is why he presses it twice. Because initially I thought, well, why doesn't he just keep it on? Why does he do that? But that was the reason why. But I think it looked very cool. Sorry, what were you going to say?
It's because it used so much battery power.
Really? So really,
exactly
the
right.
battery was this. I suppose back in that day, if you wanted it any longer, your watch would be like, I don't know, 10
crazy.
inches above your wrist type thing.
I'm sure the battery was like sort of like a 2-pence piece kind of size, but triple the thickness of that.
Yeah.
And, just didn't last. It lasted a few months.
So there's a couple of interesting, nice bits of trivia around this as well. Obviously, it's the first watch worn by Roger Moore's Bond. Now, the P2, interestingly, it was the same sort of price as the Submariner of the day. So obviously, he wears a Submariner later on, the 5513, and they were similarly priced. Now, what we can say is obviously the make was Hamilton, which is an interesting thing, because why is that, Brian?
Because one of the characters is, of course, Hamilton.
Hamilton, indeed, yeah, which is a cool little thing. So what I also found out, Hamilton have released this year, in fact, of March this year, I'm so tempted. They have released the Hamilton, the Hamilton PSR, which is based on the P2.
Oh, okay.
Right, and it looks pretty much bang on the same thing. They've released two versions, a gold-plated version and the stainless steel, which I think the original P2 might have come in a gold-plated version as well. I'm not sure. So they look exactly the same. You can press the button on the side. I think with the PSR, the digital time is on there permanently, but it's quite dim. So
right.
if you're in sort of a dark setting, you'd probably see it, but if it was bright or the sunlight was catching it and you needed to see it brighter, you press the button and then the time sort of the brightness sort of strengthens, which is quite cool. And I looked in and I think it must be the same case dimensions, because it is a big, thick, chunky watch. Currently they're selling them £675 for the stainless steel one, and I think it's £900 for the gold coated one. Personally, I'd go for the stainless steel, because it is. The only difference is, I think it says one says Pulsar and one says Hamilton in the corner. That aside, they look pretty much bang on, and I'm assuming the battery will be a lot better in the modern one. But is that something you'd consider getting at all?
Oh God, yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yeah.
It looks a business, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's just so, it's so retro. But no, I love that look.
Yeah, I do. I'd just be constantly playing with it though. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to get to sleep. I'll be waking up. Is it 5:48 yet? Oh no, not yet. Go back to sleep. Oh, 5:48 yet? No. Go back to sleep. I'd just be constantly. I would just never get any sleep. It'd be abysmal. But
the way you adjusted the time on those things was just there was like a little. It wasn't even the button you pressed for the time to light up. You had to adjust the time with a pen. Because or a pin, because there was like the button was indented, and in order to change the time you had to put like a physical I don't know, nail, pen, whatever. It's had to adjust the time. It was just so of its time.
Yeah. Well, I hope they've changed that with the modern version, but and interestingly as well, it's one of the other few times, a bit like Thunderball, where Bond's wearing the Submariner, Q comes in with the top time. Here we've got Bond wearing the P2, and then M comes in with the Submariner 5513. So that's again, it's seeing Bond in the same scene with these two watches. Obviously, the P2's great, but we've got to talk about what I would say is probably, in my eyes, the most famous, or at least the most recognisable, the most memorable Bond watch for me would definitely be the Submariner from Live and Let Die. What do you think?
Wholeheartedly agree. When I think of the quintessential Bond watch. That's what comes into mind.
Yeah.
It's just that scene. I remember just being amazed as a kid when the teaspoon flies.
I was going to say which scene because it's in quite a lot, and then I thought I'm speaking to Brian Dobson here. I know exactly which scene he's on about.
But that teaspoon scene, I just thought, wow. I mean, it just blew me away at the time. But it's just everything encapsulates Bond happens in that scene. It's really good. But no, I just love the look of it, and just when it turns red when he turns the bezel.
That's
just
very cool. Very, very cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just a quintessential watch, and I love all the dialogue around that as well. There's some really, really good dialogue.
With M, because M's basically having a go at him saying, the burden taxpayer, and I could just take it to a watchmaker down the street, and Bond just has to show him out, doesn't he? And M's face when the spoon flies off onto the watch, and I'm very tempted to test that theory right now about deflecting the bullet. It's brilliant. That scene is fantastic. Obviously this is the first time we see Roger Bond. Straight away he's in bed with a lady, then he's seeing M and Moneypenny, and you get that chemistry right from the get-go with M and Bond, and also with Moneypenny and Bond, I think, like with Roger. And the Submariner it must be the Bond watch that gets the most screen time, like compared to any Bond watch, like in one particular film, because we see it so much, but there's so many good scenes with it. Bri, there really are. Obviously, you mentioned the teaspoon. We got the classic, the watch, and the line that goes with it. Come on, hit me with the line. What is it? It's so good.
Sheer magnetism, darling.
Oh, and I love the way he just kicks into the music, and he's like on the airplane after that. But so just quickly, we'll go through some of the sightings of the watch. It's worn basically throughout most of the film. We see him where he's having breakfast before he finds the Queen of Cups tarot card. When he's killing the snake in the bathroom, he's wearing it. When he's bedding solitaire. When they're in the poppy fields. And obviously after he's been sort of kidnapped and Mr. Big Kananga's like, that's a particularly handsome watch you're wearing, and then Teehee obviously tries to take it off, and Butterhook, I like that. That's a really cool little put down. There's this like giant guy next to you. He's about to he could easily chop off your finger or whatever, and he's still got the coolness just to say, "Oh, Butterhook." It's brilliant. I love that. And also when he's in sort of Kananga's island, he uses it quite a lot. But the scene. Another pivotal scene, which doesn't have anything to do with the gadgets, but it's how Kananga finds out that obviously Bond's had his wicked way with solitaire, because he says the registration number on the back of Mr. Bond's watch,
which is, without looking at your notes,
which is wait 3266.
Yeah. Bang on.
Right, trivia question maybe later. I don't know. If it's not, we'll put it in there. But the fact that he used that and obviously Solitaire said it was true, and obviously it wasn't. That's a whole big part of the story. So even though the gadgets are brilliant, that particular scene, no gadgets used, but yet it's still pivotal, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah,
which is fantastic. And then obviously when he tries to escape the crocodile farm, he uses the magnet to attract the sort of Rolex of the boat, and you think, oh, well done, Bond, he's got it. And then the rope is there to stop the boat, and you're like, oh, what's he going to do now? And obviously the next sort of stunt scene is just one of the best things ever.
Yeah, I think that's a great twist, because you see him using that and you think, his gadgets come to the rescue, and then when it doesn't work, and then it actually throws a different twist on that completely, and you think, oh, I was expecting him to get out of that one, and he hasn't. But
this is brilliant, because I think they need to do this more in Bond, and they do it quite often. But when he has to use his wits, his cunning, his bravery, and not just rely on the gadgets to get him out of things. But I love that. I love the fact that you think, oh, he's going to be fine now. Although when he's in the boat, I'm not sure what he'd paddle with, like his little fingertips or something to get to the end. Maybe his crocodile skin shoe. He'll use that and use that to paddle to the side. But yeah, it's brilliant. And then obviously the rope is there, and he can't get it. And then You've got it when towards the end, obviously when he's at the voodoo ceremony, he's wearing it then, and then when he's in the underground base. So you see Kananga explains to him about that the bullet, with the compressed air and everything, and he sees it on the side. They're strapped, and then he uses the magnet to trace it. Now he was a brave man because obviously he put it in his mouth. I'd be so scared to suddenly and swallow that thing, and then Bond ends up like Kananga does. It would be like that. I guess the film, we wouldn't have had any more Bond films after that if that had been the case. But he was a brave man to do that. And then obviously we get the brilliant bit where they're strapped up, and he turns it to the rotating buzzsaw. And that, Bri, that is amazing.
I love that. And
brilliant.
I always think that gets a little bit unnecessary flack when people say,
Why?
well, yeah, you didn't know that was a gadget, and all of a sudden he turns it on. But it's an unexpected twist, and I love it. I love.
But if you look at the bezel, they're like sword teeth.
Yeah.
So it's not just like a normal smooth bezel. They are like jagged teeth on that. So, and it did spin. Obviously they had separate watches. So they had the watch that turned red. They had the watch with the pulling out the string for the magnet. And they had obviously the one that did rotate. It had with the little miniature motor in it, I think, or something. But it did actually do it. It did work, and I think it's fantastic. I don't know why anyone would have an issue with it.
I think it's just so people say, well, it was never explained that there was a buzzsaw in it, if you like.
Yeah,
but I mean, you don't need to.
No, I don't think so. I think certain times it's good to have that little extra bit of surprise in there. Like, obviously, it's good. I think it's good. The Bond fans, when they're told what's going to come, you've got that anticipation of when's it going to come. Oh, the injector seat. We know it's going to happen, but when? But equally, it's nice to have that other little bit where like, oh, wow, I didn't know that was going to happen as well. And I think you need both sides of that. Which obviously this work, which is great.
Yeah, definitely.
So now this is, I think, the most expensive watch that's gone to auction, the most expensive Bond watch, I should say.
Yeah.
So we have... It's sold in Christie's. So there are two watches. So there's a Buzzsaw watch and there's the sheer magnetism watch. Two different watches. The Buzzsaw watch to date is the most valuable Bond watch sold at auction via Philips for 365,000 Swiss francs in 2015. I'm not sure what that is in pounds. It was probably about 125,000 pounds or something, maybe.
Maybe a bit more. Actually.
Maybe a bit more, yeah. And that was obviously a huge amount. That came with original sketches and signed Roger Moore 007 inside the case back. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah,
I like that.
Definitely.
So the Buzzsaw one didn't actually tell the time because obviously it had the rotor in it. But for me, that is probably definitely the most memorable and one of my favourite watches in the whole series. I think it has to be for most people.
Yeah, I'll go along with that. It's just because it's used in so many scenes.
Yeah,
it's used in so many different ways. There's so many different functions on it, and it just looks the business.
If someone said to you, right, Brian, you can have any watch from the series, would you take the Live and Let Die watch? Would you take one of the early Connery Submariners, or would you go for something completely different? What do you think?
I think so. Yes, I think it would be. It's definitely something that's been used in multiple films, and something which is definitely a bit more classical looking. And I think that Live and Let Die one just kind of encapsulates it, really, doesn't it?
Definitely, yeah. So there are a couple of other interesting things about Live and Let Die. Firstly, actually going back to the Hamilton P2. The original is on sale now. By the time this comes out, I think it would have already been sold, but it's through the prop store, and it's on either the 1st or the 2nd of December, which I think will now be in the past. But so we don't know how much it would have sold for now. But that actual original Hamilton P2 watch is for sale, and I think it's currently on for like 7,500, but obviously the bidding will still keep going. And I think they're expecting 15 to 20,000. I'm not 100% sure, but would you like to own the original Hamilton?
Yeah,
that would be.
I would actually. Yeah,
that would be pretty sweet, wouldn't it?
I just wouldn't stop fiddling with that. But definitely.
So there is actually another watch that Bond wears in Live and Let Die, not just the Hamilton, not just the 5513. There is also a watch that he wears when he's doing the boat chase. So you see quite there are quite a few close-up shots where he's wearing it. Now, I didn't have a clue. I didn't even know about it until I researched into this. Now, I think I sent you some of the pictures and you had to look. You didn't think it was a Rolex.
I don't think it's a Rolex because I think the style,
the bracelet looks different as well.
The bracelet is not a Rolex bracelet.
No, definitely not
of any series. So it's not a Rolex. I was thinking it could possibly be a Longines because it looks a little bit more, again, a bit more dress-like. It also looked like a Hoya, not a Tag Heuer, but a Hoya, which were obviously the original brand before they became Tag Heuer. Possibly a Hamilton. There's a few different watches.
That'd be interesting if it was a Hamilton. So Hamilton actually had two watches for Bond in this film. If that was the case,
but it's certainly not a Rolex. But if it's a shame that there wasn't any sort of bigger, more exposed pictures that you could actually, zoom in on that. But looking from what it is, it's very difficult to tell.
Again, do you think this is an instance that they because the boat chase was the first scenes that they shot for Live and Let Die? So do you think that basically they turned up, the Submariner wasn't ready, the Hamilton they were obviously only going to use for the pre-title scene, so it was like, right, who's got a kind of expensive looking watch? Give it to Rog, or maybe even Roger's own watch, perhaps.
I think that could be Roger's own watch because, as you say, the first scene shot, so it could have been just like, right, you're on set.
Yeah.
Let's go, and
I think it was a quick turnaround, wasn't it? Before when he found out and when he had to shoot, it was quite a quick turnaround, I think. Yeah,
so I think there's a good chance that was his own watch.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? I want to know what it is. I want to know what it is.
Yeah, I know. I might look into that a little bit further, actually, and see if I can see anything more on that. But I've tried to scour the internet on that one, and it's just not coming up trumps on that one.
Well, equally, like everyone listening, obviously there are lots of sort of people into watch aficionados out there. If anyone can check it out, have you look at obviously the ones we mentioned with Thunderball as well, when he's in the helicopter and when he's diving, when he's removing Duval's dog tags, and also when he's in this boat chase in Live and Let Die. If anyone has any clues as to what the watch is, it'd be really cool to hear from you, just so we can find out what it is.
Definitive on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, now on to the man with the golden gun. So again, we have the Submariner, the 5513, but he wears two different types of Submariners in this film. So he also wears the 1680. Now, I only found out about him wearing the 1680 reasonably recently because there's a really beautiful close-up of the 5513 when he's outside the Bottoms Up Club and he pulls back and he checks the time, doesn't he? And that's definitely the 5513. So that's the same style watch as the Majesty's and the Live and Let Die one. So it's definitely that one. But he also, if you're looking at other scenes, he clearly wears a Rolex with like a cyclops over the date. So like a raised bubble just to magnify the date, and the 5513 did not have that. So there is the part where he's in the Muay Thai club where Anders has been killed, and he's sort of searching through a handbag and stuff. You can clearly see it's a Submariner 1680 and not 5513. You can see that sort of raised glass over the raised crystal over the date. And when he's outside the Muay Thai club, he's wearing it. On
Scaramanga's Island later on.
Yes,
it features when he's with the Rolex agitator.
Definitely, yeah.
And I hadn't noticed that as well, but it's clearly a different model.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? So and then when he's on the walkie-talkie to Goodnight, and the Rolex agitator, and then the 5513. It's hard. Maybe he might wear that on Scaramanga's Island when he's actually on location, but I think when it's in the studio, it might be the 1680. But it's hard to know. But it's very difficult because you don't get super close-ups apart from the one outside the Bottoms Up Club. But what you can see, sort of sometimes you can just see that raised bit, and it is the different one. And with the 1680, there is two types. There's a 1680 red and the 1680 white. And now that red or white determined the colouring of the word Submariner on the face of the watch. And obviously, I think it's really hard to tell because you don't get that close up. I think it could be the red, but who knows? It could be either of those. But it's he definitely wears two versions of the Submariner, doesn't he?
Yeah.
In Golden Gun.
Yeah, and I hadn't noticed that myself till fairly recently. I just assumed it was the same model all the way through.
Yeah. So looking back, it's strange, isn't it? You might think Bond wears one watch per film, perhaps two watches, but in some of them, he's wearing more different types of watch than you'd think. And that happens as well in some of the later films, which obviously we'll come to another time.
Yeah, definitely.
But before we move on to Spy, there's one other watch, which a bonus watch, which we have to mention, and this one is the watch of Francisco Scaramanga, and it gets a lot of screen time. He basically wears it all the time, like when he's in on his island at the end. He's got a short sleeve shirt, so you really see it quite a lot when they're dining, when they're having dinner. You see it a lot, like it gets a lot of screen time. This now trying to find out, because I've read loads of places that say, it's a Rolex King Midas or Cellini, and that is partly true in terms of it being a Rolex Cellini, but that's not the full story behind it, is it?
No, it's not. But because you've got a Rolex Cellini or Cellini, however that one is pronounced. I think it might be pronounced Cellini on that one. Chile. But and I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But the bracelet is not. The bracelet is by another company called Piaget, and the why they would be interlinked, I don't quite know.
Yeah.
But it does seem to be the case. So it's a gold dial, 18 carat, as you would expect for Scaramanga.
Yeah.
And it's just a very, very distinctive looking style.
Because I remember when we were researching this, and the dial and the case is definitely Cellini, but I couldn't find any bracelet to match it, and everyone was saying it's a King Midas, but it's not, because they're sort of like a D shape almost, and it's definitely not a King Midas, so it's definitely a Cellini, because that is what the dial is. But then looking at Piaget, the bracelets match up perfectly. Mm-hmm. And so, it had to be. So it's a mix of the two, which is kind of interesting why they went for it. But it does look super stylish. It looks really, really absolutely beautiful watch.
I think they might have melded those two styles to make them even more ostentatious.
Yeah, probably.
And quite possibly. I mean, I know we didn't talk about it earlier, but Goldfinger's watch is very, very similar.
Yeah.
With predominantly, obviously, all gold with a very heavily polished yellow gold. So I think it's just to give that feeling of wealth and power.
It's got to be done, hasn't it? Definitely. The other additional place where you see him, a really good bit where he's wearing it, is where he's assembling the gun before he shoots high fat. You get a really nice close up of it there. So Rolex Cellini. With a Piaget bracelet. There we go. Right, we're ditching the Rolexes for a little bit, aren't we?
We are.
And we're on to, I think, is this your favourite Bond of all time? It's got to be up there, isn't it? The Spy Lover.
It's got to be up there. I don't think it's necessarily my favourite Bond of all time, but it's the one that was probably most memorable, indelible for me, because it's the first one I ever saw on the big screen. So that one always has more of an impact.
Yeah.
So I think when I saw this first opening scene of this particular watch with the ticker tape, again, it's just so memorable
and so Roger.
It's
well.
so Roger, isn't it? It's so Roger. This time he's got the quote LCD quote Seiko, the DK001,
nice.
And it's that opening scene where the ticker tape spews out the watch is just magical, isn't it?
I've got one for you now. Without referring to your notes, can you tell me what the exact message says? I know you know this.
Oh God, yeah.
Are you looking at your notes, Dobson?
No, I'm not looking at the notes. I'm not looking at the. I don't think it's on the notes. Or maybe it is. Oh, come on.
You know this one.
There's 007 in there. 007 report to HQ immediately. Am I
Pretty
close?
much bang on, pretty much. So it's 007 to report HQ immediate M. I
Right,
think.
right.
Let me check the notes.
It's close there.
I'll give you that.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'll give you
Right.
that. But I mean, that's brilliant, isn't it? Straight away, we got the pre-titles and we got Bond, like with the log with Sue. I loved your interview with Susie Vanna. Absolutely
thank you,
beautiful
yeah.
interview that was. Really. She was lovely, wasn't she?
Yeah,
really
yeah,
nice.
terrific. Yeah, no, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, great interview.
Thank
and
you.
What an opening scene as well, like sheepskin rug in front of the fire in a log cabin. It is great stuff. Obviously, Roger having a bit of fun and enlarging your vocabulary and all that sort of stuff going on, which I've never known what he meant by that. But no,
I still don't.
No, I'll buy her a dictionary for Christmas. Maybe that'll help.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we obviously get a really nice close up of the watch there. Now he obviously wears his watch throughout the whole film. I don't think he wears another one. We mentioned before there was that publicity still with the Rolex GMT Master, but he, as far as I'm aware, we'd never see him actually wear the Rolex in this film.
No.
Just the Seiko 0674. So yeah, we see him in the pre-titles. We see him in the Cairo scenes. He's wearing that. He checks his watch when he's on the train. Do you remember when Anya's in the compartment next door and they're having that little bit of who's going to come into whose compartment? And he's and there's a brief bit where he checks his watch there, which is quite good. Hoping that Anya will join him. Throughout the Sardinia scenes, we see it. The Lopara scenes, again, he checks his watch. So this time, do you remember when that golden camera ball is going along and he's got this sort of grate in the floor that he lifts up and he's about to drop himself onto the ball, and just before he does that he checks his watch again, so we get to see it then. And obviously when he's in Atlantis with Anya, in fact he checks his watch again just before he comes across Jaws. He's like doing this when Jaws suddenly comes in. So
yes, yeah,
I think this must be the film that he checks his watch the most, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what is your opinion on? Obviously, we've had Rolex. Obviously, there's been the Gruen, the Breitling, and stuff like that. But in terms of the Rolex being the main one up until this point, what is your opinion of Bond suddenly going to Seiko and for the next few films having Seiko as his main sort of brand of watch?
I think it was very much a product of its time in the sense of around about that time, technology's becoming more and more of a feature. We've obviously had the introduction of the Hamilton in Live and Let Die, and digital was clearly the way the times were going. And I think at that mid-70s time, analog watches, who cares about them? The future is digital. So
Yeah.
and I think as soon as the digital watches started to become more prevalent, especially the LCD ones, because they were cheaper to make and the batteries lasted longer. And then clearly there was a deal done with Seiko for multiple films.
Yeah.
And I think that because the cases were thinner, they were a bit more readily available. The price point was a little bit lower, and I think it just became a bit more accessible maybe. So I think in the minds of maybe a few people, analog was history, digital is where we're going now, and that became, it's very much that Roger era you associate with that style of watch. And
I think as a Bond fan, it must have been like, now I've got a chance to own an actual genuine Bond watch as opposed to dream about owning one. So that must have been a pretty cool feeling as well.
Yeah, I think again it goes with that era and that territory quite well.
Yeah,
you certainly, that's the later Rogers. You always think of those digital pieces and I think we'll come onto it later. But we've got one where we've got an analog and a digital combined.
Yeah.
But I think it works well.
For me, actually, out of the... So part one, just for the listeners to know, we're going up to Fiore's only, and then part two will be Octopussy onwards next time. But from the Spy, Moonraker, and Fiore's only, like the Seiko watches are all great. But in terms of visual styling, I think I prefer the Spy Who Loved Me, the 0674, over the other two. visually, I think I like the two little. Are they buttons on there or the two little? Are they style things?
Buttons.
Yeah, and
on,
they
on
look,
the front.
Yes,
Yeah.
And I think they look. I think the styling of it is really, really cool. But do you think they missed a trick? Now this is interesting. Do you think they missed a trick at the very end when Bond and Anya are in the little escape pod and they're going up and they're being, the big boat sort of they sweep into the big boat and M is there and Minister of Defence as well. Do you think they missed a trick by M going, hang on a minute, I've got to send Bond a message, and like M is typing away while Bond's in bed, and then you just hear this as the ticker tape comes out, and if so, what message should he have sent?
Yeah, I never thought about that, but yeah, it would have been nice to reprise that again, wouldn't it?
Come in, 007 or something, I don't know. I am, sir. No, that's bad. Oh, God. Right, okay. Oh, dear. Okay. So there's there's a bit of trivia around this one. So the Seiko 0674, the same watch can also be seen in For Your Eyes Only. Yeah. Now, this is one of the crew members of the St. George. It's the guy who goes down, who then gets handcuffed on to work at the ATAC. Yeah. You can see he's wearing the exact same watch. I doubt it has a ticker tape sort of option, but it's quite interesting that he's also wearing the same watch as Bond. Did you have an opinion of which of the Seikos was your favourite, or he wears some nice Seikos in A View to a Kill, actually. Yeah, as well.
Which one's my favourite? I don't know. It possibly could be the Spy Who Loved Me one of it. Because I do quite like those two buttons on the front as well, from exactly what you said. But I do quite like the combined analog digital For Your Eyes Only as well, because you've got the kind of best of both worlds there. But I think
so if you could have any of the Seikos from the Bond films, what one would you go for?
I think for sentimental reasons, Spy.
Yeah. Good one.
Just because I think that's where that whole origin began. If that's it, with the association with Seiko, I think I'll probably go for that.
Brilliant. Okay, 2 more to go then. We're on to Moonraker. Now, again, obviously he's got the Seiko. This one is an LC Quartz memory bank calendar, so it's M354. Now, again, we see him wearing it throughout the whole film. So when he first meets Corinne Dufour, he's wearing it. When they're in bed together, we get quite a close-up of it when he collects it off the bedside table, when he's in the Hotel Daniele with Goodhead, and we see him collect the watch off the table there, which is quite cool, at the Daniele. During the boat chase, we see it as well. Mm-hmm. There's a really good one where he's on the flight to Drax's underground lair. The hang glider, and he's and we get a close up of it then. When he's climbing out of the pond after being crushed by the snake, by the python attack, and also when he's in the blast chamber. Obviously, that's when it's interesting. So Spy, we get the gadget at the start and he wears it for the rest of the film. Moonraker, we see him wear it for the film, and then right at the end or towards the end, he uses the main gadget. Although it does appear after that. Did you notice?
How do you mean it appears after that?
The watch, in terms of at the very end, when Bond and Goodhead are floating in space.
Yeah.
Did you notice the little watch hovering through the thing? Yeah. So it makes a mini little appearance at the end of the film as well, which I think is quite cool.
Bang on time. Yeah.
That's got to be one of the best bits of dialogue that goes along with it, hasn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, so what do you think of the memory bank then?
I think that's again that's another iconic looking watch, and everything works pretty good on that. There's a bit of interesting trivia, and I don't know if you be aware of it, but on all of Roger's films, or certainly 2 of them, Moonraker and
I love that you go from all of them to 2 of them.
Yeah. Sorry, I meant
that's quite a big difference.
I meant where he wears the Seiko. It didn't say right, did it? It displays 1008. I don't know if you see 1008, and the reason for that is the advertising for Seiko at the time It was on an analog watch.
Right.
1008 was a smiley, happy face.
Ah.
Okay. So when the watch was promoted, or any watch for that matter, if it had the dial on the 10 and the dial on the 2, it presents like smiley, happy, upbeat. So you'd kind of, it would influence you in purchasing it. So they wanted to carry that over with the digital, but obviously it doesn't work as well. So whenever you see it with 1008, it was Seiko's branding of this happy smile.
That's really cool. I didn't know that at all. Does it doesn't work quite so well with digital though? Or
No,
does
it doesn't. It doesn't translate. But that's where the 1008 comes into it.
That's fantastic. I didn't know that at all. That's really, really cool. Also, I think it's definitely worth mentioning, although it is not sort of a watch, and I think it often gets confused for a watch, is the wrist dart firing gun, which obviously, because he's wearing the memory bank throughout the film, but it's never given to him as a, we don't see Q giving him this watch, but yet it has a gadget. But what Q does give him is obviously the wrist dart gun. But I know that's, not for everyone listening here, because most of the people listening here will probably be pretty hardcore Bond fans. But I think for the sort of Bond fan or the casual Bond fan, I'd assume, and at least I think, that they would correlate the wrist dart gun to it being a watch because it's worn on the wrist. And I think that sometimes gets mistaken. But equally, that's a really cool thing. I know it's not a watch, but I think it's definitely worth a mention, isn't it? So in terms of other trivia, then the bracelet worn by the bracelet worn by Bond in this film is actually not the standard one for this watch. So again, it's a bit strange why they choose to not go with the standard. Why do they do it a bit differently? Who knows? But there was also the advertisement for Seiko watches. When he's in Rio, they're in the sort of ambulance car, they're going up the hill, and they drive past a massive billboard before the British Airways one, and there's two Seiko watches there. Apparently they're a gold Seiko 0903 and a Seiko 0439. So there we go. So
I think this was really the beginning of product placement being so heavy in the Bonds.
Yeah, this is it, isn't it?
It's always been there, but I think they were starting to really milk it at that stage.
Because there's a Marlboro cigarette billboard as well, isn't there? And then and obviously the British Airways one, which is so good. That's fantastic. But yeah, no, great, really good. So what do you think of the actual gadget then? Obviously we had the ticker tape in Spy. Here basically he opens up the case back, there's sort of like a explosive, and he's got the long wire that he can use with a detonator. Brilliant line, bang on time, gets him out of the blast chamber. What's your opinion on the gadget, but also on that particular scene?
I think it's a great scene. I think it's a memorable scene, and it works to good effect.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think having like an explosive within your watch is really cool. The one thing I would say is like he does delay the getaway a little bit, does Bond. So the thing explodes and then he spends a bit of time just to chill. Then he does the bang on time, and then it looks like he's just having a casual sort of walk. and then it's the countdown is less than 10. Get out of there, Bond! Come on! And then obviously they're crawling through the air vent when the exhaust fumes go after them. But yeah, no, very cool. I like that one a lot. Okay, so we'll move on to our last film of this particular episode, which is For Your Eyes Only, and there's a lot of good watch stuff going on, Bond watch stuff going on with For Your Eyes Only. So you mentioned earlier the sort of duo watch. It has both an analog and a digital screen, dial. Can you tell us a bit about that one?
Yeah, well, it was basically a black analog face, a dial, and then the digital display on some of the models of that time was either underneath it or above it. In this particular case, it's above it, and on a stainless steel bracelet, and just quite a thin cased, quite elegant looking watch. Yeah,
I like this one. I think it's pretty cool, the duo display. And do you think, like, was that, obviously it's a thing of its time, having the duo display, do you think people were like, wow, so we've been hit with digital and now we can have both? Was that, do you remember that sort of thing coming out?
Yeah,
when it was,
I do, and I had one.
Really?
I had one. I don't know if it was actually this particular model, but I did have a Seiko. I mean, it was a very, very similar one if it wasn't this one. But I had one and I bought it on the strength of that alone because I just thought you've got the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Because I think very much of that time you had people saying a proper watch should have a analog dial. That's what proper watches are about. You need a dial.
Yeah.
And then you know, the kids of the day no. It's digital. That's where we're going now. And I think that just literally combined the two. And I remember having, I think I had a blue dial one. It was a blue dial on a bracelet, and I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Because you had the option. I mean, I'll be honest, I always looked at the digital.
Did you?
Because I always thought that was
the cooler version.
Yeah, the cooler version of telling the time, basically.
Yeah. But would it not screw your head up if, for whatever reason, they were just telling the different times? You're like, which one do I believe?
Well, they started to do that because they started to have dual time, so you could change the analog to a different time, but have the digital set at another time.
Which might be useful if you wanted to time in another country, or if you were travelling into zones, which I think was why the GMT Master was, because you had the different you had the 24-hour dial as well, so you could do the different dates for the different zones, and I guess you could do that with a dual watch display as well if you wanted to.
I thought it was really cool. Still do.
Yeah, and what do you think? So this one, the gadget, obviously is not a major one, but we've got the speaker on the back. We see it on the case back when there's a lot of good scenes. So there's obviously that scene with Max the parrot, and he puts it on there, and you see there's a speaker on the back, and Q is trying to contact him and get through, and then they patch him through to obviously Downing Street and Maggie Thatcher there and Dennis, and I think it's a nice sort of light-hearted moment, and obviously this is where the watch takes a scene. So it's not a big major gadget. You've got the digital display which reads "Come in 007" on the digital, so obviously he knows, and then you've got the speaker on the back. What do you think of that? The sort of gadgets for this one?
Yeah, I think it's quite underplayed, but I mean that's really in keeping with the film itself.
Yeah.
It's just a bit more low key, but I think the fact that you've got that coming 007 written on looks good. And,
I think so.
Yeah, I've got no problem with it.
Cool. And so this watch again, there's quite a few sightings of it. So we see when Bond's driving the Lotus Esprit and he stops off to check the map, the white version. We see him wearing it there. When he's driving the De Chevaux as well. During the Q-Lab scenes, when he's shooting Locke, we get a great one of it, where he's standing like rock solid, legs apart, gun trained on him. That's one of my favourite Roger moments. In terms of Roger looking the business, that scene for me is just so good. A car's charging towards him and he's not moving an inch. I love that scene so much, and you can see him when they're watching. That's such a good scene.
Yeah, go along with that.
Yeah, obviously during the assault on St. Cyril's you see it as well, and obviously at the end of the film. So yeah, I think it's a memorable one. I think it's a good one. Obviously, it does its job, but yeah, it is a good one. But he does wear another Seiko in this film. Now, this one is nicknamed the Golden Tuna. It's obviously the diving watch that he wears when he's going down to the St. George's from the Neptune sub. 600 meters, it's 7.549. What do you think of this one? What do you think of the diver, the Golden Tuna, as they call it?
Well, it's very distinctive. It's got a titanium sort of a monocoque construction, so it's just all one piece unit. It's just so unusual that it's not the sort of thing you'd see every day. No,
you wouldn't wear it down the street. That's definitely not one to wear with your DJ, is it?
No, it's not. I think it's a functional watch. So kind of stainless steel coating, but it's just it's a product of its time. But it's clearly just it's purely functional, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. Obviously, no gadgets, but so obviously this is one that goes down to the ATAC, and you can see it on where he's wearing it on the outside of the yellow suit, when they come up having recovered the ATAC as well. But what we can see, so this has got a 600 meter depth rating, right, which is way deeper than how far they go down, like way deeper. 600 meters is massive.
Oh yeah.
Like most people diving, recreational diving is like 30 to 40 meters. Then you get sort of advanced level down to maybe 60, 70 meters, and anything below like 80, 90 meters is proper crazy depth. And this watch is 600 meters. Do you know the next Bond watch that is able to go to that depth after this one?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's not for a little while. I'll tell you that.
I'm gonna guess a GoldenEye.
It is after GoldenEye.
Oh right, okay.
Do you want,
go on then.
Okay, it's the Planet Ocean from Casino Royale.
Wow, really?
600 meters. So he doesn't wear anything that can reach that depth up until then, which is pretty. Which shows you how impressive that is. Then. Yeah, actually, now that you've just said it, yes, I can see what you're saying. Yeah, but again, like you said, it's purely functional, but it is a great one. So it's also the first identified titanium watch that Bond wears. The second, that's another good question. Do you know when the second one is? Again, massive amount of time before Bond wears a titanium watch. At least I think.
What, the next time he's wearing a titanium watch?
Yeah.
Ooh. Is the Living Daylights? No. That's not titanium. It's not titanium.
It's a big chunk of time.
It's therefore it's pretty recent then.
Yeah. Like as in very recent.
As in Spectre recent.
Almost Skyfall. He wears a titanium Planet Ocean in Skyfall. So I believe he might wear one in between, but as far as I'm aware, I think that's it. And another last little bit of trivia: Roger also wears the same Golden Tuna model anyway in North Sea Hijack.
Yeah, right.
Which is a great film, actually.
Yeah, I like that one.
I'd only seen it for the first time last year or the year before. Very kind of got that die-hard feeling about it. I think, it's fantastic. Really worth a watch if anyone hasn't seen it.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Well, that about rounds up then, doesn't it?
I guess so.
Through to A Few Eyes Only. It's been good fun. I really enjoyed going through them. But what I've noticed going to do a bit of research is just how many there are. Because I thought, okay, obviously you know the Rolex, obviously you know the Seiko, the Breitling I knew, but there are all these the little sort of moments and the nuances, and the ones that we haven't even been able to identify yet, like the Live and Let Die boat chase and Thunderball and stuff like that. And the Red Grant watch from Russia is, we don't think it's a Gerard Perregaux. I doubt it anyway, but there's that.
So what's been your favourite, Chris? Everyone was talking about.
So I've got 4 things that I wanted to ask you, and I'll tell you mine first. So I want you. It'll be interesting to see which ones we match up on.
Okay.
And everyone listening as well, you can obviously play along with this. So this is only for the ones up until Few Eyes Only. So I want to know what you think is the most iconic, what is the most memorable, what is the most stylish, and an honourable mention. Okay. So for me, I think the most iconic it has to be the Submariner 6538. So this is the Submariner that Bond wears in Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, and Thunderball. The first 4 Bond films, like it associated Rolex with Bond hugely. The Submariner was Bond's watch of choice, obviously not for Fleming, but within the movies. And I think for me, that has to be the most iconic. That cigarette lighter shot at the pre-titles of Goldfinger, fantastic. Narrow strap aside, fantastic. I'd say the most memorable, which I think some people would probably also say is the most iconic, but I wanted to split them. The most memorable, without a doubt, has to be the Submariner 5513 from Live and Let Die. It's incredible. The screen time is more than any other. All the gadgets it's got. It looks great. I absolutely adore it, and it's probably my favourite watch in the series.
Yeah.
Most stylish for me, I would say, is the pre-Daytona chronograph, the Rolex in Majesty's 6238. That is absolutely a beautiful watch. It really is. If anyone wants to have a look, just put the pre-Daytona for Majesty's, and it is so good. And I like the close-up of it in the wheelhouse and stuff like that. But for me, I think I would, if I could have any watch purely based on style, that's what I'd go for.
Yeah.
In terms of honourable mention, now I was stuck here, Bri. I had two things, because I feel like I should get a Seiko in there because obviously they've covered in quite a number of films that we've just looked at, or the last few films we looked at. But equally, the Red Grant watch, even though I'm not quite sure what it is, but that, just in terms of, it is iconic as well, it is memorable as well. I know it's not Bond's watch, but it's the first gadget watch. The scenes where it's used in the pre-title scenes, the scenes where it's used obviously in the train fight and everything. I think I'd have to go with that as my honourable mention. But I also want a Seiko in there, but I haven't got one, and I feel bad about it, Brian. I feel bad about it.
Well, I'm going to correct. I'm going to correct that, because I've got the same. I've got the same three choices. I think the Goldfinger 6538 is. It's so Bond. It's almost bordering into Fleming's Bond as well.
Yeah,
and for that reason, that's probably the most iconic. For me, the most memorable is when I first saw Live and Let Die, and the whole the whole Buzzsaw thing. I just thought was brilliant. I'm going to go with an honourable mention to the On Her Majesty's 5513.
Nice.
But I think I'm going to have to, crowbar that Seiko Spy Who Loved Me ticker tape watch in there with the two dials on the front, because is that
your most stylish, or is that your honourable mention?
Oh, sorry, my honourable mention on that one,
because
I just think that sums up a period, both in the films and for me watching that. I just think that's cool as you like.
Definitely.
So honourable mention for the Seiko for me.
And it would be great to hear what everyone else's sort of on terms of those four options are, what everyone else thinks. Now, we did mention at the start that there might be a little bit of a James Bond Watches of Bond quiz. Now, I know you've drafted up some questions, and they're looking pretty cool. Should we take them in turn? You ask one and I'll ask one. So how about we will... Do you think we should say all of the questions and then come back with the answers, or should we say a question, give them like a little bit of time and then answer? What do you think?
I think we should do the answers at a later episode.
Honestly, what, for part two? Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so we'll take them in turns. Then you say one question, I'll say another, and then we'll come back in part two, which won't be this year. So we'll mention at the end of this episode what's coming next, but we will have a Watches of Bond part two if people are keen for it next year. So here is the Watches of Bond James Bond quiz. Off you go, Brian.
Well, let's see how well you've been listening to this episode, folks, because Chris mentioned this one earlier. Question 1, in which film is the line... In future, Commander, allow me to suggest a perfectly adequate watchmaker just down the street?
Lovely. Question 2. Which Bond actor purchased a Rolex to help him secure the role of 007?
Question 3. Bond wears a watch that is also the name of a character in exactly the same Bond film. What is the watch and what is the film?
Question 4. Fleming gave Bond the same Rolex watch as he owned himself for the novel On Her Majesty's Secret Service. What is the name of the model?
Good question. Question 5. In which novel does Bond use a Rolex as a knuckle duster to defeat a henchman?
That is a great question. And a sub question of that is if you can say which film he does the same thing, albeit extremely briefly, then you get an extra bonus point for that.
That was cut, wasn't it? Oh, yeah. That's a good question, isn't it?
Okay, on to question 6. Which Bond film is the last time we see him wearing the iconic Rolex? Now, that is a good question, definitely.
Question 7, one for the die-hard Flemings. Tough one. Which brand of watch does Tiffany Case wear in the novel Diamonds Are Forever?
Very good. Okay, question 8. Which brand does Timothy Dalton's 007 wear in the Land Rover chase in the pre-credit sequence of his debut Bond film, The Living Daylights?
Question number 9. Which Bond villain from the novels boasts an 18-carat Patek Philippe Calatrava?
Wouldn't mind one of those. On to question 10. Which model of Rolex does Peter Sellers wear as Evelyn Tremble in 1967's Casino Royale?
Question 11. In the novel From Russia with Love, what brand of watch does Donovan Red Grant wear?
Nice. Question 12. Which brand of watch does Le Chiffre wear in the 2006 film Casino Royale?
Some toughies there.
Yeah, and we're going to add a bonus question, which, if you've been listening, you'll get it. In Live and Let Die, what registration number does Kananga ask Solitaire is on the back of Bond's watch? What registration number? There we go. That's a bonus question. Question 13. There is another Bond watch, which we haven't discussed, which is also from the 1954 TV version of Casino Royale. Bond does wear a watch in that. Now, I don't know if it's ever been identified, because obviously we're talking a long, long time ago. He does wear a watch in it. I haven't. Have you had a look into this one at all?
I'll be honest, I haven't.
No, obviously it's not an Eon Bond. It's Climax sort of TV version, but he does wear a watch in that. Not sure what it is, but worth a mention as well. So there we go, everyone. You have until part 2 to get your answers together, and it'll be interesting to see how everyone does. What do you think, Brian? Do you think everyone's going to be on point? Do you think everyone's been listening, or have they just been having a little snooze? Perhaps,
well, we'll find out in the next episode. But there's a few toughies thrown in there as well. But,
definitely.
We'll see how people do.
Excellent. Well, as we said, Watches of Bond won't be next week. JBR will return next week, but the Watches of Bond will return next year in, hopefully the year that we see a release of the next Bond film. We really hope so. It's got to happen, hasn't it, right? It has to happen. But we'll see. We have to do a big shout out as well to Michael Kerwin, who's edited this episode. So thanks a lot, Michael. And he will actually be, he's got an episode coming up with a really, really cool documentary that he did. So, keep a lookout for that one. Also, obviously, we've given you a watches quiz, but it's not that far around the corner until we have the illustrious, the bumper, brilliant JBR Boxing Day quiz. Now, everyone, we're going to do a similar format to last year, where we put the invite out and we get a few people on the show. Brian will be there. I'll be there. Tom will be there. Dan maybe will be there. We'll get a few of us on there. We'll each have some questions, and we'll have a little sort of mini tournament like we did last time. And I believe the current JBR Boxing Day champion is a certain Marlena Orth. Is that right, Brian?
It certainly is.
Yeah, nice one, Marlena. So we'll see if we can crown a new champion. But whoever wants to get on board, let us know and get your thinking caps on and get studying. And we'll send you the dates for the Boxing Day quiz soon as well. So they're always good fun, those episodes. I do like them.
Definitely.
Yeah, excellent. Well, have you enjoyed yourself? What have you thought of today's episode, Brian?
Loved it. It's great to go down memory lane and look at all the watches there. It's just amazing how many there is. Really, you think there's 2 or 3 iconic ones, but there's almost been one a film, isn't there?
There's a lot in there. Yeah. I still can't believe that Top Time story about buying it in the in a car boot sale for £25 and selling it for over $100,000 like that same year.
Incredible, isn't it?
But would you sell it? I mean, I suppose you'd have to, wouldn't you? Because I mean, obviously the markup's insane. But then it's a piece of Bond history, and it's tricky, isn't it?
At that kind of money, yeah, you probably would. But
yeah,
same token, if you could hold on to it a bit longer, you kind of want to, wouldn't you?
Or just sell it to like a really, 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 really good friend who's also really, 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 really stinking rich, and then you can pop round to see it every now and then as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, it's been a lot of fun. I hope everyone's enjoyed listening. And both Brian and I will be back for the Watches of Bond next year. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you next year. All right, everyone. Take care.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Good night.